My name is Mr. Derek Amutavi. I am the Business Development Manager at Southend Tech Limited. So Southend is a managed technology services partner, cybersecurity service provider, and consultant. We offer data protection as a service, UPIS, and also generally we are a digital consulting company. So managed ICT, cybersecurity, data protection, digital consulting, Southend Tech got you. That you may require as a company, as a person, as an institution, whichever makes sense. Southend Tech was incorporated in the year 2018, so we've been here for quite some time. And we have a lot of experience. Thank you. So our motto. So at Southend Tech, we normally offer compliance in regards to both the technical aspect and the legal aspect. So I think we'll get to know more about that. So our motto is data privacy, safe cyberspace. Data privacy mostly surrounds the legal aspect, the legal requirements in regards to compliance with the laws of the land. And then safe cyberspace covers the technical aspects, that's the cybersecurity and generally information security. So all of them coexist in the same environment and one can't work without the other. So yeah. So this is just a brief explainer on one of our value propositions as a company in regards to compliance with the data protection laws in Kenya. So number one, obviously this entails training, but number one, it's a legal requirement. You are required by the law to comply with the provision and the regulations of the Data Protection Act 2019. So you just have to, because it's a legal requirement. Number two, accountability. Number three, we have human error reduction. Number four, reputation management. Number five, we have bridge management. I'll not explain because that's what the facilitators will do. So now these are one of the benefits. These are three benefits that come when you are a Southend Tech partner. Obviously, we are NITA certified as the National Industrial Training Authority. We're NITA certified to train on data protection and cybersecurity. So for example, this is just an example. Hospitals can apply for reimbursement up to 100% before the training. So that actually covers most of your costs when Southend Techs come in to train your organization on either data protection and cybersecurity. And then we have two, enhanced trust and reputation for your company, because as you can tell, currently with the ODPC issuing enforcement notices, and also of late, we have one company who has been fined 5 million. So you can actually imagine the reputational damage that comes with non-compliance with the Data Protection Act. And then obviously, our partners will attest, we have flexible engagement terms. So in regards to engagement, Southend Tech obviously has tailor-made solutions that enable everyone to be able to afford compliance in Kenya at the moment. So that's why we say we are very flexible. So we give the service that can actually be affordable to everyone. That's just a brief overview about our company. So I think that's that for now. Let me allow the chief facilitators to handle the rest of the meeting. So I'd like to introduce one of our data protection experts. She's actually part of the task force that came up with this Data Protection Act, Mrs. Brenda Gabantu, to take over. Brenda, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Derek, for that, about Southend, and we really appreciate Southend for putting together this webinar. So this afternoon, privileged to have two of our facilitators, both experts in matters data protection, just to take us through the topic, what does data protection have to do with me? I know many of you are asking yourself the same question, both individually or a business. We have so our first facilitator, her name is Miss Christine Akinyo Mondi, an advocate of the High Court and associate at Gatama and Associates LLP, a law firm in Nairobi. Of course, very much active, involved in matters data protection, and also being an advisor to most of the complex business transactions, both in Kenya and without. And of course, she has trained so many institutions in data protections and has successfully helped to register them with the Data Protection Commissioner's Office. She's also very much enthusiastic about cybersecurity and is currently undertaking a program with Stanbic Bank and Strathmore University. Our other facilitator is Farida Bina, an advocate of the High Court also. And then she has a lot of experience in litigation, mediation, and drafting. Very knowledgeable in corporate governance, data privacy, and artificial intelligence. Also undertaking so many other programs with Plan International, Clear Kenya on matters human rights, and National Legal Education Aid and Research. So our facilitators, you can see, are very enthusiastic about this topic and are the best in their field. So imagine you go for a meeting. Let's say it's a corporate meeting, so you're required to do some registration at a desk, and I know many of us have done that. And then when you get home, somebody calls you and asks you, I hope you got home safe. And you're wondering, who's this? And the other person on the other end says, it is me. And you're like, you who? And that goes on for a few seconds. And you're like, how did you get my number? And they tell you, I got it from our visitors book. And then it clicks onto you the event that you attended, and you registered your number and many of the particulars you are asked to register. So because you're agitated, you disconnect the call. A few moments later, a WhatsApp message comes in, and the person says in the chat, can we talk? And you become more agitated because this is the number that has just called you. And you're like, talk about what? And at this moment, you're beginning to ask yourself, how did this person get my number? Why did this person pick on me? Why is this person talking to me and not getting that I do not like talking to people I don't know? So you can, I believe many of us have gone through this or even similar, similar incidences where you find that somebody has your contact or somebody has invaded your privacy without your knowledge. And this afternoon, we want to know this data protection, what is it about? What does it have to do with me? Do I have anything to do with it? Or is it for businesses? Is it for individuals? Who is a data subject? What is data protection in the first place? So to begin us off and to just dissect some of those questions, we have is Advocate Christine Akinyi-Omondi. I would like to welcome you to take the floor.
But I am Akinyi-Omondi from Gatama and Associates law firm. And today I just wanted to take you through why it is important for organizations to comply with the Data Protection Act. And this is one subject that I'm very passionate about because I feel like it happened to both of us. I know some of us don't have, let's say, physical properties like land or apartment or any deliverables that we have, but we have personal data. Each of us has the names that they were given. Each of us has, or some of us have account numbers that are directly identifiable to them. And each of us has a phone number, either registered by Safaricom or registered by Airtel. And that particular phone number, if you can recall the registration process that went ahead with Safaricom and Airtel, that the communication authorities indicated on the importance of having that on. So each of us has a phone number, we have an address that's directly addressed to you, either to you personally or to a company that you are affiliated to or associated with, or you have a particular home address that is identifiable to you. So today we're here to discuss that. What does data protection have to do with you as a person or as a business? But this particular webinar is about your business. I want you to understand that I've been following on this week we are in the Data Privacy Week, and I've been following with the ODPC, Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, who are currently holding conferences at KICC. And there is one thing that that Rose Mosero Muindi had said we had a webinar this week, and she noted that they're not here to punish any company or any person, but they're here to build a compliance culture. And as we delve into the presentation, we'll get to understand why it is important to have a compliance culture and not just follow the rules that are there or the rules that are set by the ODPC. There was this the FinTech webinar that was on Wednesday, and it was on Tuesday. Oscar Otieno, the Deputy Data Commissioner, had indicated that they're continuously monitoring compliance, and whenever they receive a complaint, they lawfully investigate the accused, and this thing, it is a continuous process. They're working with other regulators to ensure that industry players are compliant. I want to take you back to, there was a time there was a very big outcry about digital lenders. And one of the things that I think it was one of the things that got me impressed with the Data Commissioner was this: the digital lenders at the moment, the ODPC removed, there was a notice, or it was a compliance audit notice on digital lenders. And in tax, for a digital lender to get a certificate, they need to be compliant with the Data Protection Act. So we get to see that the ODPC, there is a merger between regulators, and why it is important for any organization that needs to conduct business in Kenya to comply with the act. Because for you, an example in case is the digital lenders. For you to be a digital lender in Kenya or to be issued with the certificate of a digital lender, you must be compliant with the act, and you must have the license by the ODPC. So as you see, I want to take us to the obligations that, or the important bit of the act and why it is important for organizations to comply. And one of the obligations that comes to mind, or the first thing that comes to mind to me, is the obligation of controllers. And I want to define controllers as a party or an organization that decides what is done to a particular personal data. So when you get into a building and you find guards or watchmen asking you to write your name down, or asking you to write your phone number, your ID number, there is a person who asked them to do that. That party who asked them to do that, we call them the data controllers. So, and then, or you get into a building, you see a CCTV camera. Is there a notice indicating that there is a 24 hours inspection in the building by the CCTV camera? Who authorized the collection of that particular data? Or who knows, after the collection of that particular data, where does the video in the CCTV go to? Where do the books that you write your name on go to? Who sees or who checks the books that are there? The persons, the visitors who visited the particular building. So the person who determines the purpose of where the particular data goes to, or what is done to the particular data, that is what we call the data controller. So one of the obligations that a controller has upon the collection of a particular personal data, be it the name, be it the ID number, be it the KRA PIN. Example, for lawyers, they collect, law firms, they collect PIN certificates, they collect ID numbers for directors, they collect names, they collect addresses for directors in a company for them to register a particular company. So in that case, that lawyer becomes a processor because they were asked to process a particular, to create a company for the directors. So there is an obligation for any person who collects personal data that is mandated by the Data Protection Act. And one of the obligations is to register. You have to register with the ODPC or the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner for you to be able to collect any data, for you to be able to store any particular data or to share it with any third party. So the obligation to register is a mandate under the Act. And the other thing, you have to renew it, the registration, and you have to appoint a Data Protection Commissioner. We will talk about the DPO or the Data Protection Commissioner as we proceed. But one of the major obligations that you need to understand is the obligation to register. The other obligation is to conduct a data, or the obligation to have data protection by design or by default. And by this, what we mean is this: the Act has, the way I had started, I indicated that one of the intentions that the Commissioner wants for controllers to have or processes to understand is this: you are supposed to ensure there is a data protection culture in your organization. So if a company is there to, let's say they have IT functions, or they give IT as a service, and then they provide a particular IT system or program or application to, let's say, a company or something like that. So whenever you are building a software, does it understand, or does it comply to the Data Protection Act? Or in the organization itself, are you training your employees on the importance of Data Protection Act? Do you have policies in place? Are there policies on the cybersecurity? Are there policies to protect the right to privacy as mandated by Article 31 of the Constitution on the right to privacy, and as mandated by the Data Protection Act? So you have to ensure in each function in the company or the organization, each person and each process understands why it is important for you to comply to the Data Protection Act. So this is what we mean by the obligation for data protection by design and data protection by default. Another obligation that you have as an organization is the obligation to conduct a DPIA, or a data protection assessment, impact assessment. We'll talk about this much more later, but we'll get to understand that there is a particular data, whenever you collect it, you have to get advice from the ODPC before you do that. The other obligation that controllers have is that there is an obligation on contracts. So whenever you are, the contracts that you are sharing with the service providers, and you will get to understand as we proceed that we have a data controller, the person who decides what is done to a particular personal data, the person who collects personal data, and then you have a data subject, a person whose personal data is collected. Whenever you go to, like I given an example, you enter into a building, and then the watchman or the guide is asking you for your phone number, for your name, for your ID number. That watchman is acting under the instructions of a controller to collect that particular data. So we have you become the data subject as the person whose data is being collected. And then we have the controller who decides what happens to that particular data. And then we have the processor. In this case, our processor will be this watchman. They were instructed by the company to collect this data. So we have three people: the data subject, the processor, and the controller. I know you've been hearing these terms over and over again, but I want you to keep these three terms in mind because it is important to understand who is a controller, who is a processor, and who is a data subject. And as we proceed, we'll get to understand more, but you need to keep these three people in mind because they are so very much important in Data Protection Act, and it determines whose data obligations of each particular party. So we have obligations on contracts, and each contract you have, either between you as a controller at the company and someone who provides service for you, or a party that provides service for you, you have a contract between the two of you. Is there a clause in the contract that indicates the obligations between the two of you to protect the personal data that each of you collects? And another obligation is the obligation on breach. You'll get to realize that the Data Protection Act has given the obligation on any person who collects data, whenever a breach has occurred, to communicate to the commissioner upon breach. Are supposed to be within 48 hours. And within those 48 hours, you're also supposed to communicate to the data subject if any particular breach has occurred. And then we have there is another thing we'll talk about, which companies need to really consider on, because this is the only stage that they will be able to understand their flow of data, and someone who is supposed to ensure the compliance of that particular organization. And that is the data protection officer. It can either be a company, it can be a firm, or it can be a consultant, external or internal. It can be an employee who you have trained to understand about the flow or the processes of collecting data and storing and deletion in the company. This is the person that is supposed to liaise with the ODPC in your registration upon audit that is being conducted by the ODPC, and to ensure that there is compliance with the Act. I don't know if there is any question. I want us to understand why it is important for organizations to comply. I know there is another slide that we got to see as we proceed, but I want to bring to your attention, and I know some of us have gotten to read about the Oppo case, but companies need to understand that they're not being punished actually, and they need to take this as a way to up their business or to up their game, or to make clients to trust them with their personal data. We have had so very many reports of breaches. There was a time that when you were, it was during 2020, in Kenya, there were many cases about SACCOs being breached, or and then there were very data that was being stolen. We've also heard about Safaricom. There are very many class suits against Safaricom on breaches of data, of personal data. And then you'll see that actually Safaricom is a company that I have a very huge interest in when it comes to the Data Protection Act, because I feel like there are so very many cases that are coming to their way, and that they are pertaining to the rights of data subjects to inform them when they are changing their phone numbers, or they are giving out their phone numbers to another party after the phone number is being deactivated, or whenever they are sharing or they are collecting data about bank details of a person who was registered with Safaricom, or whenever that they are the SIM swapping. There is a very major case that is ongoing on SIM swapping in Safaricom. And then we also have another case of Safaricom where an employee had shared 11 million subscribers' personal data to SportPesa, and people were getting messages from SportPesa about the betting company, yet we didn't subscribe to SportPesa, but it was an employee who had shared personal data or the phone numbers, account details, names to SportPesa. So I want us to understand that ensuring compliance is not a punishment actually, but it is to make it easier for the functions of the company, and to make it to make the data subject or a person that is your client that is giving you data, their personal data, and for them to understand that there is safety or there is security in your system, and they don't need to worry about their personal data. So there is the obligation to procure a certificate. You need to register. You need to register whenever you are collecting that. If you know that you are collecting data, personal data, a person's name, their phone number, their account number, bank details, maybe purposes of invoicing them, purposes of paying them, either it's your employee, it's your client. Are you collecting their residential address? Are you collecting their children's name, dependents' name, purposes of insurance or any other purpose? Are you collecting their health data for insurance purposes? Are you collecting their biometric data for access purposes? Are you collecting where they stay, their geolocation? If whenever you are doing that, if you know that your organization does that, which I know all organizations do that, you need to register with the ODPC. The other thing, for you to register, one of the things that I have realized whenever you are registering with the ODPC is that there are categories of data. If you're collecting an employee's data, you need to list what are you collecting. Whenever you are employing someone, whenever you are recruiting someone into your team, what are you collecting from them? Their names, their CV, their address, location. Do you ask them for their religion? Are you asking them for their sex? So you need to understand what are the processes. You need to know and list the processes. Because we need to know that I had that during the Rose Mosero had indicated yesterday that they actually want to be so very active in audits, conducting company audits. And whenever they find that you are not registered with the ODPC, yet you are collecting personal data, there is a 5 million fine for you. Another obligation that you need to have is a demonstration of compliance with the principles. And the principles are, whenever you're collecting data, I mean, I know we've heard about this a lot. Is it adequate? Are there errors? Are the data that you are collecting, have you been given consent by the person you are collecting their data from? How are you storing that particular data? Are you storing them on the computer? Are you storing them on papers, hard copies? Are you storing them in Kenya? Are you storing them outside of Kenya? Because the moment you understand where you are storing them is the moment you get to know the modes of compliance or how you are complying. The other thing is that you need to demonstrate compliance and notify data subjects. And this is done through a policy statement or the privacy policy or data protection policy, either in your website or internally. As we've spoken about the obligations of a person who collects data, or you as a data controller, or you as a processor, you need to understand that if someone lodges a complaint against you and it is found that you are breaching, or you have not registered yourself, or you are not complying with the Data Protection Act, there are consequences for that. The fine ranges from 5 million to 3 million to 5 million. And then there could be penalty. There's supposed to be also punishment for just the person. There's supposed to be compensation for the person whose data has been breached. So as we continue on the reasons why you as a business should comply, I want us to look at the enforcement notice. And in this case, I want us to compare Aga Khan Hospital and the Oppo Kenya Limited. in Aga Khan Hospital, around November, December, an employee contacted us as a patient, a previous patient in Aga Khan Hospital. And you'll see that the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, when they gave out the enforcement notice, they noted that it was an inappropriate communication to a patient. An employee contacted someone who had left the hospital, and then there was a complaint to the ODPC that I had left the hospital and then someone is still contacting me on this and that. It was an inappropriate communication. And it was not pertaining to any treatment. It was not pertaining to any communication as regarding the treatment. So the ODPC gave an enforcement notice to Aga Khan Hospital asking them to comply to the Act, to ensure that whenever a person's data or a patient's name, a patient's information on their health or contact or address is collected or is processed or is stored, there is a compliance to the Data Protection Act. ODPC gave that notice to Aga Khan Hospital, asking them to comply to the Act. I want us to go back to the Oppo case. Oppo just got a penalty notice this month, and Oppo had shared the picture that was shared by one of their clients, someone who took a picture from the Oppo phone. They shared it in their Instagram, and then Oppo took that photo and shared it in their Instagram photos. So Oppo, there was a complaint that was made to ODPC, and then Oppo were asked to share their policies on Data Protection Act, show the ODPC that they are complying to the Act, but they didn't. They didn't share it with the ODPC. They were given time to comply, but they failed to. So the Act provides that the first step is a complaint is raised to the ODPC, and then the ODPC contacts you as the accused or as the controller or as the processor, asking you to show how you have complied or how you are intending to mitigate that particular breach. And they give you time to comply. If you fail to comply, the ODPC now gives you a penalty notice. Now we move to the penalty notice. We together understand that the enforcement notice is a fine not exceeding 5 million, or to imprisonment of a term not exceeding 2 years. But you get to understand that Aga Khan actually, they complied. They only issued with the enforcement notice, but they didn't get to be issued with this penalty notice. And this was what was issued to Oppo. Oppo were given a penalty notice, and they were fined to 5 million. They were given a fine of 5 million. Whenever we are taking in the Oppo case, we need to understand that you will be given time. You'll be given a notice of enforcement. There will be a complaint made against an organization that has breached to the particulars or to the mandate of the Data Protection Act. You will be notified by the ODPC of that complaint. And when you are notified of that complaint, you need to act in haste and notify the ODPC of how you are complying. And if you are complying, how are you complying? What are the measures or what are the safeguards you have taken? You need to show the ODPC of what you are doing to safeguard that particular personal data. So what is the future of data protection in Kenya? There is still, I really have an interest in the Oppo penalty notice because these people were given an enforcement notice and they were asked to comply. They were asked to show us, do you have a privacy policy? Do you have a data or a data protection policy? Do you have cyber security measures in place? Do you have, is your company trained? Are your employees trained on how they are supposed to process data? Yes, we are here for business, but do your employees know that they need to comply with the Act? So There is a case about the Wamai and Allen advocates case. It's a very recent, it's a very recent ruling by I think it was the first ruling by the ODPC, where we got to understand, and as I had indicated, that a data subject is a person whose data is being collected or whose data is being stored, whose data is being destroyed. And then we have a data controller. A data controller determines the purpose of the processing of that particular data. They give this particular role, or they assign that role of processing to another party. And that third party becomes a data processor. So we have three parties: a subject, a controller, and a processor. So in this Wamai and Allen case, we get to understand that a data subject is a natural person. You have to be a natural person. A company cannot be a natural person. So you have to be a natural person for you to be able to complain to the ODPC about a breach. That is a very takeaway point, a very important takeaway point from the Wamai and Allen case. And then in the Oppo case, as I have just really explained it in brief of what it had entailed, but we need to understand, so just takeaway points from these two particular cases, or the activities that we have been seeing in the data protection regime in Kenya. That the ODPC has been given the power by the Act. For them too, they will come to you for the compliance audits. They ask you, how are you complying? Show us how you are complying. So you have a case that is with the ODPC. There is a complaint against you. The ODPC comes to you, unlike courts. ODPC comes to you and complains about the particular breach. Then you have we need to understand the implication of having the ODPC post these particular breaches or these particular notices online. We have Oppo, almost a majority or a particular number of Kenyans have known about this particular breach or what Oppo did, or what Aga Khan Hospital did. And I'm very sure it doesn't happen only in Aga Khan, where an employee contacts a patient just like that, and not because of their or the health purposes or the particular purposes they came to the hospital for. So the reputational impacts that this will have on companies is actually not supposed to be ignored, but to be really taken seriously, and why it is important for you to comply. So as we get to understand why it is important for us to comply, you'll see that I had indicated that registration is mandatory. Actually, it is actually so mandatory, because if you are found that you are collecting personal data and you are not registered, you will be penalized. And so it is important for you to have the copy of the establishment documents, or the CR12, or the company incorporation documents. If it's a partnership, you need to show the incorporation of that particular organization. And then you need to understand particulars of your company, your organization. Why are you collecting that data? A description of it. Have you divided that data or categories? Is it sensitive? Is it health data? Is it biometric data? Is it location data? Is it marital status of that person? So you need to understand the particular data that you are collecting. We can proceed. And then you need to know that this particular license is being given by the ODPC is supposed to take you for 2 years. Within those 2 years, you're supposed to ensure you comply. And there are periodical audits. The guards that you have outside the company are people that you have given the authorization or the instructions to collect that particular data outside there. So you need to get them to understand why they need to comply with the Act, why whenever they are collecting that, they need to protect it, they need to safeguard it from theft, they need to safeguard it from cybersecurity issues or cyber threats that are there. And then you need to carry out a data protection inventory or map. Do you know, upon collection, What happens? Where does it go to? Do you collect it manually? Do you collect it electronically? Are there access measures? Are there multi-factor authentication passwords? Are there passwords in computers? You need to understand the flow of personal data in the organization. Do you have policies in place? Do you have cybersecurity policies? Do you have a data retention schedule? Do you have policies in that case? Do you have data protection policies? The fulfillment of the rights of data subjects, whenever a person, whenever you ask someone to give you the numbers, are there consent forms? Are there somewhere they can sign that they are giving you that data? Are there consent forms from you to give to your employees whenever you are collecting their personal data? Have you put in place consent management frameworks? Those are the consent forms that you have. Are there policies in place? Have you put in place data breach management strategies? Whenever there is a breach, is there a clear framework for people to report that there is a breach? And then do you review your contracts to include clauses on data protection that people can understand about your collection practices or your processing practices? And then you need to prepare documentation with the ODPC that includes the impact assessments whenever you are registering, or to make clients to trust them with their personal data. We have had so very many reports of breaches. There was a time that when you were, it was during 2020, in Kenya, there were many cases about SACCOs being breached, or and then there were very data that was being stolen. We've also heard about Safaricom. There are very many class suits against Safaricom on breaches of data, of personal data. And then you'll see that actually Safaricom is a company that I have a very huge interest in when it comes to the Data Protection Act, because I feel like there are so very many cases that are coming to their way, and that they are pertaining to the rights of data subjects to inform them when they are changing their phone numbers, or they are giving out their phone numbers to another party after the phone number is being deactivated, or whenever they are sharing or they are collecting data about bank details of a person who was registered with Safaricom, or whenever that they are the SIM swapping. There is a very major case that is ongoing on SIM swapping in Safaricom. And then you also have another case of Safaricom where an employee had shared 11 million subscribers' personal data to SportPesa, and people were getting messages from SportPesa about the betting company, yet you didn't subscribe to SportPesa, but it was an employee who had shared personal data or the phone numbers, account details, names to SportPesa. So I want us to understand that ensuring compliance is not a punishment, actually, but it is to make it easier for the functions of the company, and to make it to make the data subject or a person that is your client that is giving you data, their personal data, and for them to understand that there is safety or there is security in your system, and they don't need to worry about their personal data. So there is the obligation to procure a certificate. You need to register. You need to register whenever you are collecting that. If you know that you are collecting data, personal data, a person's name, their phone number, their account number, bank details, maybe purposes of invoicing them, purposes of paying them, either it's your employee, it's your client. Are you collecting their residential address? Are you collecting their children's name, dependents' name, purposes of insurance or any other purpose? Are you collecting their health data for insurance purposes? Are you collecting their biometric data for access purposes? Are you collecting where they stay, their geolocation, if whenever you are doing that, if you know that your organization does that, which I know all organizations do that, you need to register with the ODPC. The other thing, for you to register, one of the things that I have realized whenever you are registering with the ODPC is that there are categories of data. If you're collecting an employee's data, you need to list what are you collecting. Whenever you are employing someone, whenever you are recruiting someone into your team, what are you collecting from them? Their names, their CV, their address, location. Do you ask them for their religion? Are you asking them for their sex? So you need to understand what are the processes. You need to know and list the processes. Because we need to know that I had that during the Rose Mosero had indicated yesterday that they actually want to be so very active in audits, conducting company audits. And whenever they find that you are not registered with the ODPC, yet you are collecting personal data, there is a 5 million fine for you. Another obligation that you need to have is a demonstration of compliance with the principles. And the principles are, whenever you're collecting data, I mean, I know we've heard about this a lot. Is it adequate? Are there errors? Are the data that you are collecting, have you been given consent by the person you are collecting their data from? How are you storing that particular data? Are you storing them on the computer? Are you storing them on papers, hard copies? Are you storing them in Kenya? Are you storing them outside of Kenya? Because the moment you understand where you are storing them is the moment you get to know the modes of compliance or how you are complying. The other thing is that you need to demonstrate compliance and notify data subjects. And this is done through a policy statement or the privacy policy or data protection policy, either in your website or internally. As we've spoken about the obligations of a person, so as we continue on the reasons why you as a business should comply, I want us to look at the enforcement notice. And in this case, I want us to give the compare Aga Khan Hospital and the Oppo Kenya Limited. In Aga Khan Hospital, around November, December, an employee contacted as a previous patient in Aga Khan Hospital. And you'll see that the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, when they gave out the enforcement notice, they noted that it was an inappropriate communication to a patient. An employee contacted someone who had left the hospital, and then there was a complaint to the ODPC that I had left the hospital and then someone is still contacting me on this and that. It was an inappropriate communication. And it was not pertaining to any treatment. It was not pertaining to any communication as regarding the treatment. So the ODPC gave an enforcement notice to Aga Khan Hospital asking them to comply to the Act, to ensure that whenever a person's data or a patient's name, a patient's information on their health or contact or address is collected or is processed or is stored, there is a compliance to the Data Protection Act. ODPC gave that notice to Aga Khan Hospital, asking them to comply to the Act. I want us to go back to the Oppo case. Oppo just got a penalty notice this month, and Oppo had shared the picture that was shared by one of their clients, someone who took a picture from the Oppo phone. They shared it in their Instagram, and then Oppo took that photo and shared it in their Instagram photos. So Oppo, there was a complaint that was made to ODPC, and then Oppo were asked to share their policies on Data Protection Act, show the ODPC that they are complying to the Act, but they didn't. They didn't share it with the ODPC. They were given time to comply, but they failed to. So the Act provides that the first step is a complaint is raised to the ODPC, and then the ODPC contacts you as the accused or as the controller or as the processor, asking you to show how you have complied or how you are intending to mitigate that particular breach. And they give you time to comply. If you fail to comply, the ODPC now gives you a penalty notice. Then we move to the penalty notice. We together understand that the enforcement notice is a fine not exceeding 5 million, or to imprisonment of a term not exceeding 2 years. But you get to understand that Aga Khan actually, they complied. They only issued with the enforcement notice, but they didn't get to be issued with this penalty notice. And this was what was issued to Oppo. Oppo were given a penalty notice, and they were fined to 5 million. They were given a fine of 5 million. We can move to the next slide. So whenever we are taking in the Oppo case, we need to understand that you will be given time. You'll be given a notice of enforcement. There will be a complaint made against an organization that has breached to the particulars or to the mandate of the Data Protection Act. You will be notified by the ODPC of that complaint. And when you are notified of that complaint, you need to act in haste and notify the ODPC of how you are complying. And if you are complying, how are you complying? What are the measures or what are the safeguards you have taken? You need to show the ODPC of what you are doing to safeguard that particular personal data. So what is the future of data protection in Kenya? There is still, I really have an interest in the Oppo penalty notice because these people were given an enforcement notice and they were asked to comply. They were asked to show us, do you have a privacy policy? Do you have a data or a data protection policy? Do you have cyber security measures in place? Do you have, is your company trained? Are your employees trained on how they are supposed to process data? Yes, we are here for business, but do your employees know that they need to comply with the Act? So there is a case about the Wamai and Allen advocates case. It's a very recent, it's a very recent ruling by I think it was the first ruling by the ODPC, where we got to understand, and as I had indicated, that a data subject is a person whose data is being collected or whose data is being stored, whose data is being destroyed. And then we have a data controller. A data controller determines the purpose of the processing of that particular data. They give this particular role, or they assign that role of processing to another party. And that third party becomes a data processor. So we have three parties: a subject, a controller, and a processor. So in this Wamai and Allen case, we get to understand that a data subject is a natural person. You have to be a natural person. A company cannot be a natural person. So you have to be a natural person for you to be able to complain to the ODPC about a breach. That is a very takeaway point, a very important takeaway point from the Wamai and Allen case. And then in the Oppo case, as I have just really explained it in brief of what it had entailed, but we need to understand, so just takeaway points from these two particular cases, or the activities that we have been seeing in the data protection regime in Kenya. That the ODPC has been given the power by the Act. For them too, they will come to you for the compliance audits. They ask you, how are you complying? Show us how you are complying. So you have a case that is with the ODPC. There is a complaint against you. The ODPC comes to you, unlike courts. ODPC comes to you and complains about the particular breach. Then we have we need to understand the implication of having the ODPC post these particular breaches or these particular notices online. We have Oppo, almost a majority or a particular number of Kenyans have known about this particular breach of, or what Oppo did, or what Aga Khan Hospital did. And I'm very sure it doesn't happen only in Aga Khan, where an employee contacts a patient just like that, and not because of their or the health purposes or the particular purposes they came to the hospital for. So the reputational impacts that this will have on companies is actually not supposed to be ignored, but to be really taken seriously, and why it is important for you to comply. We can proceed. So as we get to understand why it is important for us to comply, you'll see that I had indicated that registration is mandatory. Actually, it is actually so mandatory, because if you are found that you are collecting personal data and you are not registered, you will be penalized. And so it is important for you to have the copy of the establishment documents, or the CR12, or the company incorporation documents. If it's a partnership, you need to show the incorporation of that particular organization. And then you need to understand particulars of your company, your organization. Why are you collecting that data? A description of it. Have you divided that data or categories? Is it sensitive? Sensitive, is it health data? Is it biometric data? Is it location data? Is it marital status of that person? So you need to understand the particular data that you are collecting. We can proceed. And then you need to know that this particular license is being given by the ODPC is supposed to take you for 2 years. Within those 2 years, you're supposed to ensure you comply. And there are periodical audits. The guards that you have outside the company are people that you have given the authorization or the instructions to collect that particular data outside there. Understand the particular client that gets into that particular building. So you need to get them to understand why they need to comply with the act. Why whenever they are collecting that, they need to protect it. They need to safeguard it from theft. They need to safeguard it from cybersecurity issues or cyber threats that are there. And then you need to carry out a data protection inventory or mapping. Do you know, upon collection, what happens? Where does it go to? Do you collect it manually? Do you collect it electronically? Are there access measures? Are there multi-factor authentication passwords? Are there passwords in computers? You need to understand the flow of personal data in the organization. Do you have policies in place? Do you have cybersecurity policies? Do you have a data retention schedule? Do you have policies in that case? Do you have data protection policies? Are there consent forms? Are there somewhere they can sign that they are giving you that data? Are there consent forms from you to give to your employees whenever you are collecting their personal data? Have you put in place consent management frameworks? Those are the consent forms that you have. Are there policies in place? Have you put in place data breach management strategies? Whenever there is a breach, is there a clear framework for people to report that there is a breach? And then do you review your contracts to include clauses on data protection that people can understand about your collection practices or your processing practices? And then you need to prepare documentation with the ODPC that includes the impact assessments whenever you are registering the company or the organization in place.
So Christine, a quick one.
Yes.
Josh is asking, if you're an individual, do you have collecting personal data, of course, do you have to register or it's only for entities? Can an individual who is collecting personal data and dealing with personal data, do they have to register?
you get to realize that there was a point that I was indicating that for you to register, you have to give the incorporation documents of the organization or the registration documents. So as a person, as an individual, you cannot be a data controller unless you are collecting data because you have been asked by a company to collect particular data. And then you realize that if you go to the ODPC website, you try to register, there are steps that you have to follow. There is a company incorporation document you have to upload. That's a must. It's mandatory. The particular account you are creating on the ODPC is linked to the eCitizen account of that particular company. And whenever you are registering or applying for registration with the ODPC, there is a particular limit that on they ask you about the number of employees. Their employees. As a person, if you're not registered, you can't have employees. And as a person, there is a particular number or a particular the annual turnover. They normally ask you the annual turnover of the organization, not the annual turnover of a person or as an individual, but the annual turnover of a company, an organization. Is it less than 50 million or is it more than 50 million? That is how the ODPC is divided. So when you go to register and you don't have the incorporation document or the registration document or how you are identified by the state as a body, a legal organization or a legal person, you have to be able to show that there are registration documents that you have registered. You have to show that there are annual turnover that you show to the ODPC that you have. So as an individual, you cannot register unless you have authority from a person who is supposed to register or is registered with the ODPC to collect particular data or to store particular data.
And welcome, Farida.
Thank you, Brenda. In one way or another, we've learned that we are all data processors and data controllers. You as an individual or as a business, be it at your place of work, or be it at the places that we go to seek services, we in one way contribute to the collection and storage of data. So we directly contribute to how we protect our data or how we protect the data that comes into our possession. Maybe if I can pose a question, do we all try to read the privacy statements that pop up when we are maybe doing an application, you're doing your random day-to-day checkup on Google, or you're using you're trying to download an app, and before you download it, they give you a privacy statement. Do we even take time to read the contents of this statement, or we just click, okay, because we don't have the time, you click, okay, your need is the app, you just click, okay, you get the app. You can ponder on that because it directly relates to data protection, as we'll see later. Maybe if I can take us through the registration process. So the first thing you need to know, you can do this application physically or online. The ODPC has provided forms that you fill and present to them for approval. But before you present your forms for approval, these are the steps that you need to ensure you have met for you to be registered. One, you have to identify yourself if you're a data controller or a processor. You need to know if you're just receiving data from individuals and processing it on behalf of someone, or you're going to do both the receiving of data, processing it, doing an inventory, and doing the controlling. All that you need to know. Then you have to know that there is a criteria the ODPC has put in place that all organizations seeking registration have to meet. One, you have to know clearly the nature of industry that you want, how this information that you're going to collect, in which industry is it going to be used, what kinds of data do you need, the volume of data that you're going to collect, and how sensitive is this data that you're going to collect. You have to know all this in your application. It is an application that will meet the criteria that is required by the ODPC. So when you have ascertained this, you will prepare your submission, you will prepare your application. In the application, you have to give details that are set in the act, and these are some of the details that you will give. You describe the personal data that you're going to process. I think Christine had touched on that. If you're going to take people's names, PINs, biometrics, the kind of data that you collect from them. Number two, you outline clearly the purpose for which you're collecting this data. And then you have to show to which class this data relates. And then you will give your contacts and then a description of the risks that come with this collection and how you as an organization, you have prepared or what plan you have in place to safeguard this data so that it doesn't get to the hands of third parties. And then now after you have done all this, you know the data, the kind of data that you want, you know how you're going to safeguard it, you have done your application, you do it in a standard form, and then you forward this form to the office of the ODPC. After you have done that, it is discretionary. The ODPC can decide to approve your application if they feel you meet the required criteria. If you don't meet the criteria, you can't be approved to go about data collection and processing. So you have to make sure that you meet this criteria that has been set by the ODPC. After you have met the criteria, you are supposed to pay registration fees. These fees depends on the class that you're applying for. So when you're giving your application, you have to be clear on the kind of business that you want to do with this data that you're collecting, so that it gives the office easy work for them to determine how much you're going to pay for the application. So we can't say that the payment is 5,000 or 10,000, but depending on the class that you're applying for, the office will be able to give you the fees that you're paying, and then you will pay it. After you have paid, you will receive a certificate. On the certificate that is issued, I want us to note that upon approval and issuance of this certificate, the validity will depend on whether you're going to comply and some other measures that the office will explain to you. So if you're given a certificate, ensure you are compliant with the things that Christine has presented so that the certificate is not terminated. I want us to know that it is an offense for you to give misleading or wrong information in your application. So when you're doing this application, try to be as honest as you can so that you don't give wrong information or misleading information about people, because this will in return affect your compliance, which might affect as well the issuance of a certificate to you. And you have to note that if you give wrong information, you do commit an offense, and that is punishable in law, as Christina said. I think she noted the fines that come with non-compliance. Next, I want us to talk about breach. You have collected and processed an inventory of a lot of data. and you have it in your, let's say, your servers, or stored somewhere in your computer, in your cloud, how do you protect this data as an organization so that it doesn't get to unintended parties? We can define third parties in this context to mean any person who comes into contact with data that they are not supposed to have access. So as an organization, let's say you have collected people's CVs and you have them in hard copy. How do you keep them so that other people do not access this personal information that has been given to you? Better still, we have company machines that store a lot of personal data from your clientele. How do you ensure that any guest who accesses your company computers does not get access to personal information that has been given to you for purposes of business? We have to note that recently, very many cases have arisen where where businesses are in charge of data, and then somehow there is a leak, and other people get to access this data. So we have to be cautious as individuals and as businesses. And when I say individuals, I mean as staff working in a company that collects and keeps an inventory of people's information. So we have to ensure that we don't give out or somehow enable third parties to access people's information. We have to make sure that we get consent before we release the information that comes into our possession. And when we are looking at consent, the Act provides that consent has to be freely given, it has to be specific and informed. For any company to give out information, this consent must be freely given, specific, and the ones giving this consent have to know that their data will be shared. This brings us to what we must watch out as individuals working in organizations and as organizations. One, when we are marketing, we know reputation is everything, but as much as we are trying to gain this reputation, there comes a legal requirement for us to be compliant with the law. When we are running these ads and somehow we collect data from the ads that we run, we have to make sure that this data that we are collecting through the ads, through our website, is safe and secure. That brings us to the issue of clientele information confidentiality. When clients give us their files, their contact addresses, we have to keep this information in a way that it's a secret, in a way that it's only us within the organization that know this client's information. We want to avoid scenarios where we have kept information in our computers, but then guests access that. And some of the very common crimes that have been happening lately include those listed, the three of them. So we have to protect ourselves in a way that we are not hacked and there is no data leakage. This will bring us to our next subtopic on how we can protect the data that we have in our computers, in our servers, and wherever we have done an inventory and stored this data. One, we need multiple layers of security to secure our inventories. Let's say as an individual, you can't sleep with your door wide open. you lock very many doors for you to get to your bedroom, so that when the enemy comes, they don't just access you. Similar to data, we have to put in multiple layers of protection, so that when someone is trying to hack maybe your network, or trying to gain access to your places where you've stored your data, they don't just access you. We have to secure our networks in a way that we are ahead of the enemy, that when anyone is trying to access you illegally or without your consent, you're alerted before this vice happens. So we can have IAM. This means Identity Access Management. We know who will access us, or who is trying to access our systems before they actually do that. This can be through having unique passwords for each and every computer, and an alert to just alert those in management or your staff that this computer is trying to be accessed from this and this area, and we are able to know, is this a legal or an approved access. Another thing we can have as organizations is network segmentation. Don't just put your eggs in one basket. Don't just store all your data in one computer, that when anyone logs into computer A, they can access every other computer that is used in that organization. In network segmentation, what we can do is have different, let's say, computers being accessed with different security features. If we are using, let's say, an organization's Wi-Fi, this should not be something that is accessible to the guests, to the staff, to the management. We have to segment it in a way that those accessing, if it's the guest network, they have their own section that guests access, and then staff, you have the network that staff accesses, and management. This way we are able to separate and monitor risk that may come with the use of network. Christine noted that we have to train our staff on the use of devices, the use of networks, and the general protection of data. So we have to teach our staff that if a guest has come and they want to connect to our network, they give them the guest network, so that they don't access all the internet and somehow get to access the whole inventory of the company. Another thing we have to do is protect our devices everywhere, anywhere, every time, anytime. I have said all this, but what I mean is we should ensure we have the correct permissions before someone can access our data. If a device does not have the protection, maybe the right passwords, or you have a password but it's something someone can guess, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and they guess it, they can be able to access the network. But then all I'm saying is, as an organization, we need to put in place a way to protect our data and be alerted when someone is trying to access us. Ensure we have secure customer databases. Databases that keep customer data should be secure and separate from the day-to-day running of the organization, so that when you're securing this data, you have at the back of your mind that if I need client A and B's information, I'm going to this database. That is where I'll access them. Let's not have this behavior of keeping or storing data on the desktop, you have a file there, and then anyone who accesses your machine can access that file and retrieve the data that your clients or customers have given you. Another thing we can do is to respond quickly to threats. I think this is in line with Joy's question. She had asked if you have not reported within 72 hours. The Act provides for a timeline, yes, 72 hours, but then there are scenarios where you will not be able to report within this time because you have to do an audit and know how actually this breach was done and how this data was accessed from which point, and you have to do an audit which might take time. So if you're not able to report within this time, you can respond and do a notice at the time that you're able to. Another thing in regard to protection of data is that as organizations, we need to have unique and very strong passwords and update them regularly. The password behavior, I think, is something that all of us can fall victim to. You have a phone and your password is 123, or your password is your year of birth, or you have followed the sequence of 3690. These are very easy things that someone who has a malicious intention can easily guess and get. So let's try to have very strong and very unique passwords, and let's not use one password over the years. We should try and update our passwords, and this way we'll ensure that our data is protected. Another thing is to enable step-by-step authentication of accounts. When someone is trying to access your server, they should be able to get a hard time unless they are your staff. So this step-by-step authentication of accounts is a way that businesses can protect their data. Then I come to another thing of limiting the information that we share online. Most of us go online, you use Google, you click links carelessly, and then maybe without reading, these links have a clause that once you click this link, you have consented to your data being given out to organizations of similar interest, or you are applying for maybe a job in an organization, and then down there it says, give us the permission to give organizations with similar interests your information, and you, without reading, you just click on that link and somehow your data is shared. So I'm urging all of us to educate our staff and personally be cautious and mindful of the links that we click online and the amount of information that we share online, because this will in turn come back to you as an individual or as an organization when you have given the same. Then be mindful of public networks and where you connect your devices. When you connect to a network, somehow you might get this network is not secured, and then other people who access this network can be able to read your data or access your device by virtue of the fact that you access this public and unsecured network. So be cautious of the networks that you access, and if possible, just access the networks that are secured and they have security features which you feel will not expose your data. Then we have to keep all software and operating systems up to date and with the latest security features. Some of us are using software, I think, from 2000 about, and the operating system cannot sustain the latest security features. So as an organization, if it means investing your money for you to get proper security, kindly do, so that you have the latest security features in the areas or devices that store your data. Then the last thing I'll advise us as companies to do is to get reputable antiviruses and firewalls to secure our software and ensure that our data is backed up. I don't know if I still have time, but what I want us to take home is that data protection is a complex thing, but can be very easy when you have outlined a step-by-step way to protect yourself as an organization. When you have done, and as an organization, we need to do an impact assessment. And when you have done an impact assessment, this will guide you as an organization to know which areas you are exposed and which areas risk is likely to come from. When you have done this and you have these areas, you're able to seal any holes that can lead to your data being leaked out to third parties. And then we need to know that, or rather train ourselves not to trust anyone with or everyone with our data. Ensure that the people you're trusting your data with are people that can be able to keep it confidential and use it only for the purposes that they have acquired it for. That is all I have for now, unless there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Farida, for that elaborate and giving us very, very practical solutions to how to manage and be compliant with the Data Protection Act. Time and space cannot allow us to belabor more. However, these issues, as Farida said, are complex and at the same time easy if you're looking for solutions of compliance. So I saw the question by Joy, which was answered by Farida, which was asking, can I still report to the ODPC on an infringement 14 days after the fact? And Farida answered that well, that yes, the Act has given timelines as 72 hours. However, you are able to give reason and justification for why you are not able to, report within the required timelines. Another question which I would like Christine to answer: can I refuse to leave my data regardless if the organization is registered or not? So Stephen is asking, should he now go to institutions to know that if he finds out that this institution is not registered, is he allowed to leave his data, or should he not leave his data there? Christine, you can jump in to answer that question.
Nice. So one of the obligations of a company is to register with the ODPC. And if they are collecting personal data, yet they are not registered, there is a very big question mark. Why are they not registered? They need to let you know, or they'll tell you that for business purposes, time, implications, they don't want to tell you, or you're wasting their time for the legal, any other reasons they may have, but they need to give you an answer on why they are not registered with the ODPC. Yes, you can refuse. As a data subject, you have a right to consent. That is a particular right that each data subject has, the right to consent. You can refuse to have your data collected. and you can consent to have your data collected. So it is a right that you have to choose whether to give them or not. And if they collect without registration and they are within the mandates of the Act to register, they are committing a breach, and you can sue them for that.
Eric is asking, he's a third-year student taking computer science. Can I be offered an attachment during April? Okay.
So I wanted to ask, and because this is one thing that we have repeated, and I think Farida has also repeated, that if you now we have a cloud service provider. You are a company. You are storing your data with a particular cloud service provider. Who are you as the company, and who is the person that you have asked, or the organization that you have asked to store data for you? Brenda, we can give that third-year student of ours before you consider them for an internship or something as one of those interview questions.
Okay, Eric, you have the floor. You've been chosen to answer the question. If there's a service provider, storing data on behalf of clients in the cloud, who is the controller, who is the processor, who manages and who controls the data? What are they? Eric, you have the floor.
Yes. So the person in charge of the company is the data controller, and the person who has been outsourced to handle the data is now the data processor.
Yes, that is very good. So you will get to understand that you need to know who you are before going to the ODPC. You need to know who you are. Are you registering as a processor? As an organization, you need to understand who you are. Are you a processor? In what instances are you a processor? And because you will need to explain, or you will need to show the ODPC why you are a processor. But you will realize that most of the times, a processor can also be a controller, and a controller can also be a processor. Because you'll see that we have someone, a service provider, who has been given an obligation to provide a service. For example, a bank. As a company, you have given a bank the obligation to process payroll for you. The bank becomes the processor. The company becomes the controller. But this bank, the bank itself, as it is, as an organization, it is a controller. And this is because they have employees. They collect employee data. They also have service providers, maybe, for example, for ICT services. So in this case, they become controllers. So they become both controllers and they become processors. So you need to understand who you are, where you stand, why you need to register, and as what. Because the moment you go to the registration portal or to the ODPC portal, you need to explain, you need to tell the ODPC you are registering as what.
Okay, thank you, Christine. There's a question on, how does one become a DPO, a data protection officer? And what kind of certifications exist in Kenya? Is there, and about the AIPP, you can briefly talk about that. And Farida, I will also loop her in to, offer her comments and sentiments on the same. Thank you.
But we have organizations like Data Governance Pros in Kenya, or Data Governance Society in Kenya. But at the moment, the Act itself does not indicate particular certifications for a DPO. But it states that for you to be a DPO, you have to have an understanding either of the processes of law with regard to privacy or data protection,
or as an ICT professional, cybersecurity expert. So we have experts in ICT or cybersecurity, and we have people in the legal profession. So you need to know whether you belong there. Do you understand the I've seen that in most job opportunities or in their job description, they're requiring that you have at least a certification in it's called CIPP, that is the European certification, and it is normally given by the International Association of Privacy Professionals. So you can just check that out, because at the moment in Kenya, we don't have certification or an institution that is giving certification for that, but people have been going for the IAPP certification, Association of Private Professionals. They offer the certifications, so you can just check what they have, because there are, if you can opt for the European certification, which most Kenyans are opting for, because our Data Protection Act actually is so very much copied from the GDPR, or the European Framework on Data Protection. So you can just go for that one, or you can go for the US one. There is CIPP for the US laws, if you want to understand on the US laws. So you can just check International IAPP for the courses that they are giving. I've seen that most people are opting for that. And I'd also advise that maybe you join organizations that keen on understanding the Data Protection Act. And in Kenya, I think there is the group on LinkedIn on Data Protection Governance Society. Data Protection Governance Society. You can also check that out.
Thank you for the chance, Brenda. In regard to training, I think I have seen something at Strathmore. It's a professional course, the way we do CPA, CS for accountants and all that. They have a professional course. It's called Certified Information Security Management. I think when you have done that, coupled with the knowledge of the field that you handle, maybe law or tech, I think when you have that, you can become a DPO, and that is one of the areas, the universities in Kenya that offer that course. And then there is the Lawyers Hub. Lawyers Hub have a training for data protection, and they actually do certify professionals.
Thank you, Farida, for that. And also worth noting, at Southend, we also train on Anita. So at Southend, we also train DPOs for companies. We have like multinational companies who, like, after they have identified a person, they feel they want the person to be their DPO. They have contacted Southend to actually proceed with in-depth training for their DPO, and so far so good. They have been successful at their roles. That's apart from the general data protection and cybersecurity trainings that Southend provides to public and private institutions. So currently, I can say Kenya is has come of age. We have some options, and I think there's no lack in regards to that. Yeah.
I think Farida has reminded me, there is a free CPIT Center Strathmore course on, I think that is one of the starting points someone can have when you want to understand what data protection has or has in store for Kenya. Strathmore offers free fellowship. I think it's a fellowship on the data protection. And I think there is also University of Pretoria, but it is seasonal. So you'll have to be checking their website on the search of those free courses that they offer. But it is not a certification or a professional certification, but it is one of those areas that are very important to enable you understand what data protection is all about. I don't know how I even forgot that. Southend Tech does give training for DPOs. So that is also an option to take as an organization in Kenya.
Thank you so much, Farida and Christine, for very insightful discussions around what does data protection have to do with me. At this juncture, we have very few minutes before our webinar ends. So I will invite Derek to give us the closing remarks. And I know that many of you may have many questions on data protection. Please reach out to Southend. We do training. We offer business solution and guidelines on how to comply with the Act, including audits, DPO, Data Protection Officer services. We have also the data protection impact assessment services, and many more solutions around cybersecurity. So, Derek, welcome for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Brenda, for that. And so I think we've had a very organized and inclusive about an hour or so. And I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this webinar. You know about Southend. So in case you have any concerns, or rather you need any clarifications in regards to data protection, cybersecurity, managed ICT, or any digital consulting issue, feel free to reach out to us. We are live on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So it's very easy for you to reach out to Southend. So even if it's not about general outsourcing the service, you can just reach out to us for consultation, because we have a team who, like many companies, come to us and we actually give them some free consultation so that they can actually take that information and take it back to the institution and they actually start implementing the same. So feel free to reach out to us for absolutely anything and anything in regards to data protection, cybersecurity, and managed ICT. So I think because of time, I'd like to just say thank you and close the session, because I'm sure all of us have been well educated. Like after joining this webinar, you know more than you did before you joined. And thank you so much for joining. Unless Brenda, have anything else to say?
Derek, yes, I do want to thank the participants for joining us this afternoon to discuss, and I hope that you will visit the booth at KICC and keep like our page, Instagram, email, the contacts are there. So we would like to wish you a very good evening, and we hope to meet again, even at your places of work or even in other forums. We really appreciate your attendance this afternoon. You are free to leave the chat room. Thank you very much once again.